I think we can all recall a time when we didn't sleep very well and really felt the effects of it. And it's not just low energy, is it? It's brain fog. It's feeling a bit vulnerable emotionally and a bit grumpy and irritable. And then come the food cravings and the coffee and the low motivation and low focus and concentration going out the window. And of course, there's long-term implications when we're talking about adding that into a perimenopause body and brain, and its whole body health, its heart health, its brain health. It's when it's carrying on like this in perimenopause, it's no joke. Sleep is important. And depending on which stats you look at, it could be as many as 60% of us going through menopause that experience problems with our sleep. And it could be just a one-off, unlikely. It could be an ongoing issue. And I certainly know from my experience with talking with clients, with women my age and a bit older, that it is a really common issue. And trying to improve it isn't always common sense. We need to get away from this fairy tale idea that it's going to be a supplement, it's going to be a sleep tea or a couple of nice meditation playlists and everything's going to be sorted again. It's not always the case. We need an empirical approach to take everything into consideration, all that we can do in a practical sense. Do you know that feeling of being a little bit drunk, a little bit out of place in your own body after a bad night's sleep? And there's a reason for that. It's partly because of reduced activity in the frontal lobe, in the front part of your brain that does the thinking and the problem solving, the logical stuff, the creative stuff. And there's kind of a dull feeling there, and that's a sign that has been kind of turned down a notch a little bit in terms of productivity and in terms of reliance on it. And the cortisol is being revved up so that your body and your brain are more interested in survival rather than trying to thrive, trying to think its way through the day. Another consideration when we're talking about trying to improve our quality and quantity of sleep and thinking about why it's important and going beyond just the energy management thing and having enough energy through the day is insulin. And I talk about this hormone a lot because the older we get, the less sensitive to insulin we become. And this can be a problem because it's a real energy balance type of hormone. And we want to be as sensitive as we can to it, and having less sleep really affects that in not a good way. And some studies have shown that there are links between as much as 40% less insulin sensitivity just from in less than a week of having poorer sleep quality. And I'll put a link to that study below. And that one's important because we're really talking not just about insulin and energy management, we're talking about metabolic health, weight, brain health, even cardiovascular and heart health. So that's definitely important. There was another study as well that I just wanted to mention as well, where it was quite a large scale study where participants were given 5 hours sleep versus 8 hours of sleep. I know I wouldn't have wanted to be in the 5 hour sleep camp at all. And it was shown through that study that hunger hormones were affected quite a bit. So that the hormone that makes you feel hungry, ghrelin, was increased by 14.9% when you were having 5 hours of sleep versus 8 hours. So not only that, but also leptin, the hormone that makes you feel full, was decreased by 15%. Quite a lot, and that's not good. So 5 hours of sleep versus 8 hours of sleep has significant changes to our hunger and satiety levels that we will naturally feel. The good news though is that we can reverse these changes pretty quickly by making a few adjustments to what you're already doing. And by doing these practical things that I'm going to explain in the moment, I've got 10 things to share with you. We're actually focusing not only on melatonin and cortisol, we're also talking about progesterone and thyroid hormones, all the hormones, all the neurotransmitters, all the chemicals that are in our body, in our brain, that are secreted naturally to help us with sleep. We need to maximize those. So here we go. Number one, routines. Your brain, your hormones love routine, and never more so than during and after menopause. So perimenopause, postmenopause, it is time for some morning and evening routines that contribute to quality of sleep. And by that I mean having a wind down time in the evening and a more of a wake up time in the morning. So something that you do for yourself. I've talked about that quite a lot in previous videos too. Number two, and yeah, I'm going to talk about caffeine. I'm not going to say cut it out entirely if you really rely on it, but it's time to be aware that the presence of caffeine, whether it's from coffee, black tea, green tea, wherever it's coming from, it will block adenosine, a really important chemical which promotes sleep in your brain. So we need adenosine. The more caffeine you have, the less adenosine you have. Number three is about getting outside for some natural daylight a few times during the course of the day. And even if that's just in the garden, it doesn't matter. But you do need to be aware that the brain chemicals for sleep take their cues from our diurnal patterns, our patterns of night and day that we have evolved to live around as animals. We are highly evolved, but we're still animals. We can't get away from that fact. So we still need daylight. Number four, get yourself some tart cherry juice and drink a shot of it every evening, a few hours before you go to bed. And not the sweet cherry juice, we're talking really tart tasting. And you could always dilute it with water if you wanted to, if the taste was a bit much for you. And that's what I do actually. And it's a really good provider of melatonin, a really important sleep chemical. Number five is about reducing screen time and lighting in the evening. And I know nobody wants to do this one. I don't want to do it either, but I know that if I want a good night's sleep, then I'm going to have to be a bit disciplined with myself when it comes to my screen scrolling time and time on my laptop for work. So this is when dimmer switches and subdued lighting, even blue light blocking glasses, can be really helpful. Number six, take a warm bath, a magnesium salts bath in the evening, an hour or so before you go to bed. And that's important that you have that time before you go to bed because you need to cool off. And yeah, a warm bath, not scalding hot, but a warm bath will help cool the internal body temperature down quite a bit. Number seven is all about food choices, and when we're talking about sleep, this is a huge factor. It can really help, it could really hinder you having a decent night's sleep. And I've talked about this before in previous videos, and I've even made a whole course on this called Wise Eating because it is so important and it is such a really effective way of how we can help ourselves through menopause. I'll put the link to that course below. The reason why I'm talking about food and sleep is because one of the most common reasons why we wake up through the night is because our blood sugar has dipped too low and your body has woken you up to alert you to that fact. Now, when we're talking about blood sugar, as I've mentioned before, I'm not just talking about the sweets, the Haribo, the sugar in your tea and coffee. I also mean the starches and the high glycemic foods like bread and pasta and rice. When we're relying on those foods a little bit too much, then it's going to create big peaks and troughs in our blood sugar, which is going to wreak havoc with our sleep. If you need more help with that, Wise Eating is definitely the course that you need for that. Number 8 is about creating an environment that is actually suitable for sleeping in. Does your bedroom look like a bedroom, or does it look like an extension of the living room perhaps? Have you got a TV and a phone and all sorts of things in there to keep you busy and occupied? Because yeah, that's going to have a big effect. It needs to be a cool temperature, not always through the day. Obviously you can have the heating on, but when it comes to the evening, just make sure that you're setting it up so that it is conducive for sleep. Your body becomes much more sensitive to these things through menopause. And also that alarm clock. Can we get a proper alarm clock, or at least something that isn't going to use your phone? I know it sounds really strange, but I've had so many clients tell me that when they do this, and I really like my Lumi alarm clock, and they have one of those, or they find their own way, but they tell me that when they take their phone out of the bedroom, even though they weren't apparently scrolling through it, they were just using it as a phone, but when they get rid of that, their sleep quality has improved immensely. It's worth trying. Number 9 is again about adenosine, one of the most important chemicals that we produce to help ourselves with sleep. And this is going to be increased by a number of things, but one of the most effective is exercise, and particularly interval training, like short bursts of hard exercise for a short period of time with a rest in between and then repeating again. The type of exercise that you apply that with is up to you. Number 10, who else are you sleeping with? Is it like me, your thoughts and your ruminating worries that sometimes wake you up at 4 in the morning? Or is it small children getting into bed with you? Is it animals, a dog perhaps, or a snoring partner? You might be struggling with sleep, but sometimes it's not solely your problem to solve. As always, you're welcome to get my help with this in the Menopause Done Naturally free Facebook community. And I've also added some links below this to the studies and the resources that I've mentioned in this video.